Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of Rant and Pray. This is a show where we talk about stuff that bothers us. Most of the time, it's about race, but we talk about these things and then we bring them to God in prayer towards the end. And today, I am joined by the wonderful, wonderful Claudia Hoareau. Is that how you say it?
That is, yes.
Okay, yay. And Claudia, I don't even know where to start. Like, you're just a phenomenal woman who's just been doing such great work in Ireland. And so I'm not gonna give too much away. I want you to introduce yourself and talk about yourself. So Claudia, welcome and tell us about yourself.
Thanks, Maureen. Thanks for having me on here. I'm really happy to be here. This feels like such a beautiful, safe space. So I'm really happy to be here. Thanks for having me. So I moved to Ireland when I was 14, and I'm Kenya. Well, I moved from Kenya, so my ethnicity is Kenyan, Irish, and Creole. And I live in Dublin now with my husband and my daughter, and I have two bonus daughters as well that my husband had before he met me.
Aww.
So we are a big, beautiful, blended family. And I'm just, we've spoken so much, Maureen, before this call that I feel like you know everything about me, and I'm like, what else do I tell her?
Tell the people.
Tell the people. Okay, so I currently sit on the board of the Irish Network Against Racism. And this is obviously something that I'm really passionate about.
Yeah.
And actually yesterday I was doing some work just prepping for different things, and my daughter was getting a bit impatient with me, and she was like, come on, mommy, finish. So anyway, just as I finished up and we were getting ready for bed, and I said to her, look, I'm sorry, I know today I was doing a lot of work. And she said, it's okay, mommy, I know you're making the world more better.
Oh, I love that.
Yeah, and I was like, okay, I'm doing something right. It's okay.
Yeah.
So on the days that I feel really tired and really drained and I'm just exhausted at everything, I need to remember that I'm making the world more better.
Yeah.
Well, we all are. Yeah.
And you've been doing this for like 17 years, right?
Yes. And to be honest, that length of time always shocks me when I hear it. And sometimes when I say it, I'm a bit like, wow. But the only reason that I even came to realize that was I recently sat down with a coach, and you know, I'd never done coaching before, and we were kind of talking through my work history, and it was all very professional and stuff. And then we were talking through anti-racism education and speaking, and she asked me, so when was the first time you ever talked about this stuff or did a workshop or spoke or whatever? And I realized that it was when I was still in secondary school.
Wow.
That was when I gave my first workshop. I went up to my principal and told her that I was conscious that my younger sisters were starting in the school, and I really wanted to talk to some of the year groups so that they wouldn't be faced with some of the questions that I was asked. And maybe, I didn't know what I was doing at the time. Of course, I was a kid, a teenager. And I think about it now, I'm like, were you crazy? But I really, in my head, I was thinking, maybe if I just tell people what it's actually like in Africa or in Kenya, and, and break down some of the myths they have, it might be easier for my sisters joining the school.
Yeah.
That was it. That was my motivation at the time.
And
so that was 17 years ago. I think it definitely helped with my own year group, because I think when I joined the school was used to having foreign exchange students from Germany and Spain who left after a while, and suddenly there was this brown girl who wasn't going anywhere. She was there to stay. And they were like, so I think if I could describe what my experiences were, there were microaggressions, but they were daily. There wasn't a day when there wasn't microaggressions. It was things like people, kind of always commenting at how good my English was.
Right.
And I do remember saying to an English teacher once, because at this stage, so many people had said it to me, and I was only new in the school, and I think I caught myself saying to her, "It's because we were colonized." And she just,
by the British, the
oh,
same as
okay.
you.
Yes,
The same as you.
the same as you. And I was like, "It's because we were colonized by the British." And she's like, "Oh," and so yeah, so I didn't hear that from teachers anymore, but the assumption was always there amongst.
Good for you. I never had the courage to do that.
You know what? I didn't either. I think I feel like that day I blurted it out. When you just kind of hearing something and you just, it's almost like I thought it in my head and then I thought it out loud.
Yeah.
I didn't mean to, because I also have grown up in a very, strict African culture, and you do not talk back. So,
you don't talk back to adults.
No, absolutely not. I didn't mean to say that. It just kind of blurted out. But yeah, just kind of growing up with people having lots of assumptions and misconceptions, and not wanting to sit next to you during lunch because your food smells different, or whatever, all that kind of stuff. So, but I mean, that's not to say that it wasn't all bad, obviously. I have some wonderful friends up to now that I met in school. So, but yeah, that was definitely the first time that I ever even talked about racism or.
Wow, it's 17. That's amazing. Well, we have a lot in common, because when we first moved to Dublin, we lived in Fir House, and you were kind of in that area as well. You went to Santa Maria.
I did,
and I went to Fir House, and so that's like, so close. And then like we kind of know similar people or similar organizations down in Dublin, but we've never really. Maybe we met once or twice, but just never.
I think we met once or twice. Yeah, I met you once at a bridal shower, your cousin's bridal shower, but you were busy doing all sorts of cousin jobs.
So Florence, was it Florence?
I think so. Yes.
Yeah.
And I'd gone with a friend. I didn't even know Florence personally, so I felt a bit like, oh my gosh, am I crashing this party? But there's Kenyan food, so I'm going.
I know, right? That's what African people be doing. We're just like, hey, you don't know me. Like, I had someone who I did not know show up at my wedding because they were invited by their friend. Yeah, and the people pleaser that I am, I wasn't able to kind of be like, so I was just like, yeah, we'll make space for you. Oh wow, okay, so I didn't even remember but that day I was so busy cooking and doing stuff and trying to avoid my mom giving her talk about sex.
That is the day, that's the first day I met your mom, and boy did she leave an impression. I was like, I need to be taking notes what this woman is saying. So yeah,
I was like, anyway, that's the topic for another day, for another podcast.
Yeah, you need to get your mom on talking about sex.
Right? So my friend Danielle and I are thinking of starting a podcast or add another element to this on sexuality, female sexuality, just because it's, especially for Black girls and Black Christian girls, like it's just, so it's very
taboo, and it's definitely something we don't talk about, but it ends up impacting on our sexual health, I think, because we don't talk about it.
Because you can't tell anyone about it. Do you know what I mean? So then you end up doing things and you're like, oh wait, anyway. So 17 years doing this, and I'm like super proud of you. You were doing things before it was popular to do it. I feel like at the moment we're in a popular phase of Black Lives Matter, and and people are becoming woke. So you were woke before.
Apparently.
Before majority of people were, and I just love that about you. So you studied theology and arts in your undergraduate, and then you did a master's in international affairs. So you've done a lot of work in Ireland with charities. Do you want to tell us about that?
Yeah. So most of my career has been in the not-for-profit sector, and but always very kind of people-based roles. So I've kind of worked doing social research. I've worked with organizations looking after the rights of migrants.
Yeah.
I've worked very closely with asylum seekers and refugees. And then also worked sort of training and recruiting volunteers to go overseas and work in other countries like India and Kenya and places like that. So I've enjoyed it. I mean, it can sometimes be a really challenging sector to work in.
Yeah.
You know, you have to be passionate about the work. You know, you kind of have to be in it with the knowledge that you're not really going to be rich from it. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
It's not that kind of work.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, I think it's interesting because just before I had my baby, I was sort of, or after I had my baby, I was, you know, I was in a space where I was thinking maybe I want to transition out of the sector. Maybe I want to try and, you know, take my skills and convert them to a different type of sector, different roles where I feel I can have more impact.
Yeah.
So at the moment I'm consulting. I'm doing some freelance consulting and working for myself, and you know, it's helping a lot, particularly with being able to work remotely and, you know, around childcare and things like that.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, I enjoy it. I really enjoy what I'm doing now, all the speaking and all the educating. And like I said, I've been doing it for so long that sometimes it feels like, you know, there's certain doors that I've been knocking, if, you know, maybe 7, 6, even 10 years ago that were always closed to me. And suddenly now it's brilliant what has happened, you know, and it's unfortunate that it's taken the death of Mr. Floyd for that to happen, for people to sort of be ignited into action. But that's happening now in Ireland, and yeah, it's great. People are, as you said earlier, it's nearly popular now to be talking about it.
Yeah.
But I think that's a good thing. I think the more people talking about it, the better. I think sometimes what can happen when you talk about oppression, or when you talk about issues affecting minorities, what I've seen happen is something, you know, it's people kind of owning the struggle so much that they're nearly resentful to anybody else doing something about it. It's a funny kind of dynamic, but I have seen it a little bit, and it's the opposite for me. I think the more of us that are talking about this, or, you know, in your own way doing something about it, and that's the other thing. I think people need to also appreciate that in your own way, you know, and in according to what you can do, you know. I think it's really important to do something, but not feel the pressure to have to do everything or to be in every space saying something, you know.
Yeah. And I love when I went to the march here in Belfast, the anti-racist march, seeing all the white people that were out there, like that, I cried, like I teared up, I was choking. I was just like, oh my God, because for me, it was just like, they see me, they hear me, especially because for so long, I can't remember if we were talking about this on the recording or just before, about people minimizing your pain,
that was
minimizing
before.
your experience. Yeah. So when you see people out in solidarity with you, like it makes you feel heard, right?
Yes.
It makes you feel cared for. It makes you think, I'm not crazy. Like, I'm not crazy. And obviously the death of George Floyd really angered a lot of people across the world. So that's why you had a lot of people out marching. But I think it's brought about, you know, awareness for people who might not have necessarily had an awareness of racism before.
Yes, I think one of the things that I always like to start with whenever I am doing any kind of talk or training on anti-racism is, you know, this idea of intent versus impact. And I think it's always a good one to consider and have in your mind as you're listening, particularly the feedback I've got from a lot of white Irish people who are, you know, who join these talks or who are really eager to educate themselves and know how to be better allies. one of the things they always say is, you know, it is uncomfortable because you're having to check yourself as you're listening all the time. And so what I say to them is, okay, instead of sort of feeling guilty about your privilege, you know, put it into action, right? So do something about it, but also check your defensiveness when you're listening, because it's often that feeling of defensiveness that actually stops you from doing something.
Yeah.
You know, so if you're checking your defensiveness and you have in your mind intent versus impact, okay, so, you know, what I said is not how it landed on the person, or what I'm doing right now, or this joke, or whatever I'm allowing in my environment is impacting that person of color in a different way, potentially, and in a negative way, potentially. So I think understanding those, or even just having them in your mind as you're in your workspaces, or, you know, with your friends or people of color around you, is really important. I think often with intent versus impact, especially if we relate it to, let's say, leadership, always, you know, people are celebrated for being straight talkers and being able to tell it like it is. But often when you are that type of person, the delivery of what you're saying is more important to you than how it's landing on the person hearing it. You know what I mean? And so I often say that that's the difference between people managers and leaders, you know, because I think leaders understand that.
True, so true.
Yeah.
And people will always remember how you make them feel, you know, not even what you said.
Absolutely.
But
Dr.
how
Maya
you
Angelou
said
says
it.
that. Yes.
And how you said it, and like, you might not have meant it that way, but, you know, how did that person receive it? How did that person, that is such a good point. So it's all about like how you make people feel and all of that. And I love, like you said, I love that we have allies, you know, because we're humans, right? So I always say, and some people think, you know, oh, you're just saying that, but I think if it was white people being discriminated against, or whatever other race, because race is a social construct, whoever, if there's a group being marginalized, I have a problem with that, regardless of the color. For example, the traveling community in Ireland gets, you know, a lot of discrimination, right? And a part of me, as a Black person who lived in West Tala, probably shouldn't care about that, because I had a lot of racism from the traveling community, but it still bothers me. It's still, because it's humanity, right? So if we're all human, if we're all one race, if we're all, if there's value in each one of us, then it should bother us when anybody, you know, gets discriminated against and gets abused in any way, shape, or form. So, Claudia, tell us about the Irish Network Against Racism.
Yeah, so it's a fantastic organization. Like I mentioned, I've been sitting on the board for a couple of years, and it's a great space. It's a very participatory board. They do a lot of important work, and currently there are over 130 member organizations in the network, and those range from grassroots groups, trade unions, school bodies, a traveler and Roma organizations as well. So just a really good mix of organizations, and you know, they're the only national network as well of anti-racism network, I should say, and so it's busy. It's a lot of work, and there are only 2 staff members because, you know, much like the rest of the charity sector, there is not a huge amount of funding, you know. So gosh, my dream would be to see the organization be able to hire, like, I mean, it needs about 10 other people, but even 2 or 3 other people would be great, because, you know, there's just so much more it can be doing. The 2 staff members there, the director, Shane O'Curry, is a fantastic guy, and he just does so much. But you know, it has the scope and the potential to do more if it had the support, you know. Yeah. But yeah, it's a great space, and you know, they also have a lot of really interesting stuff on their website, a lot of really informative and educational pieces. So there's a really good responding to racism guide.
Okay.
So, you know, anybody can go and download that, or we have a read of it there. There's also a lot of information on sort of the Irish context to racism, which is really important to me, because I think what we've all been consuming lately has been very American centric.
Yeah.
So often when I talk about racism, I try very hard to center it in the Irish context, you know.
Yeah.
So, and it's things that people don't realize, like, you know, racism is a system. It's not, you know, it's so complex. And in Ireland, you know, for example, there are 4 dimensions of racism in Ireland, if you really want to understand it. There's historical context, and that's, you know, looking at how Irish people themselves were racialized through colonization and dehumanized because they were stripped of their culture and language, and, you know, there was a lot of violence in their past. And so, you know, you're talking about a group of people, or not a group, but a country or community that were oppressed themselves.
Yeah.
You know, and then there's links, you know, and this is going back to, I think it's between the 1600s and the 1800s, where Irish people are actually linked to the Atlantic slave trade of Black slaves. So, I mean, there's so much there, I think, and it's important to look at, because when we own that, and then it allows us to unpack it and have a deeper understanding of where some biases come from, especially when you understand that you're dealing with an oppressed or formerly oppressed people. You know? And then there's things like the structural dimension of racism, which is sometimes called systemic racism. And these are just, you know, very simply the systems that exist in society that exclude ethnic minorities from enjoying their life in full, in a fair way, and then subsequently exclude ethnic minorities from having the same levels of access to opportunities. And that then impacts the same level of access to wealth, and how you enjoy your life being so much different, you know, as a minority to a white Irish person. And then there's institutional racism, which I think most people kind of understand, and these are processes and attitudes and you know, things that are ingrained, but things that are also learned. This is the stuff that can be unlearned, you know. And then there's the individual racism, which is the stuff that we are probably most familiar with, because this is the daily stuff. This is not just the incidents or the abuse, but it's the microaggression, it's the unconscious bias, it's not getting the job because of your foreign name on your CV, or not getting the house because of your accent on the phone with the estate agent, you know, this kind of thing. But then, as you know, and you mentioned before, travelers in Ireland, I think it's really important to understand that there are, you know, there's, for example, with Einar, we break it down into sort of 7. There's 7 different groupings of people in Ireland that experience racism. So there's anti-Black racism, which we call Afrophobia. There's Islamophobia. There's anti-traveler racism, anti-Roma racism, anti-Jew racism. And then there's anti-migrant racism, which is also very specific, which we call xenophobia. And then there's gendered racism, which is always something that surprises people. But I think it's interesting in how it plays out in an Irish context, because there's a specific type of, and we've seen through, so I should also mention that Einar have the only online racist reporting platform in Ireland, and it's called the iReport. So, you know, we've seen through iReport data really specific type of racism that is perpetrated on Black women, hijabi wearing women, migrant women, traveler and Roma women who are with children or pregnant. Like, it's very specific. So I think there's a lot there when people talk about racism in Ireland that they don't, that's still very unknown. There's still a lot of education that needs to be done about some of this, because it's only really until we start looking at that and owning it in an Irish context, and not looking at this as an American issue, or also not learning everything from an American context. It's only really when we do that that we can start to make changes here.
Yeah.
That was a very long answer.
Yeah. I love it, because I love that, like, so the four kind of classifications of racism, you know, in the Irish context, you know, you don't really think about that. And I think so I find, for me, the Irish people who really get the struggle are the ones that kind of know the history and who themselves, say, for example, the older, maybe in their 60s, who had gone to England or America, lived there as young people, and then came back, because for them, they remember people saying no Irish, no blacks, no dogs in places. So I find that group really, because they've traveled, they've experienced it themselves, but people who know history, like my teacher, Miss Murphy in high school, like, I just love her. Like, I haven't been in touch with her in years, but like, she was just so woke, because she had studied history. And so for her, she, you know, she could see racism, she could see bias, she could just understand it all from the context of, you know, of oppression by the British, and, you know, that kind of thing. So I think education is so important. And then I love but it's nice that you guys have the breakdown of the 7 kinds of racism groups that are, you know, abused, and the women with, you know, that's so sad.
Like, I mean, it's really sad. It's really difficult to think of anybody looking at a child in that way, you know. And I think you and I both understand that, because we're parents, and you know, we're also parents of biracial children, and I think that in and of itself adds another layer to it, because not only are you conscious to protect your child from racism, but you also want your child to celebrate all elements of who they are and feel fully who they are. You know, and that's something I can relate to as somebody who's mixed, you know, allowing myself to feel, you know, fully Irish and fully Creole and fully Kenyan all at the same time. There was something so liberating when I finally got to that space. But I understand that it's hard. It's hard for children.
Yeah, and I think most of the time, and this is why I have fought racism so much for me in my family context, because I don't want, you know, for example, I talked about, people know this from my previous episodes, of how some family members have said that Black people are the cause of all the problems in the UK, and Black people cannot rule themselves, and Black people this, and Black hair is horrible, and all of that. If my sons grow up listening to that, then they're really gonna hate their Black side, or, you know, or just feel like they're not good enough. So they'll either lean towards just wanting to be white, or being Black, but secretly hating themselves, like I did when I was, you know, a teenager and in my early 20s. But that's not what I want for my children. Like you said, I want them to embrace being Northern Irish, being Irish and Welsh, because my husband is half Welsh, and being Kenyan, being fully Kenyan. But, you know, and it's hard, because sometimes I know the world is going to look at them as just Black babies or Black boys. So I do put a lot of work in letting them know that they're Black, and telling them that Black is beautiful. And maybe I do neglect their white side, because I'm just like, your white side will be fine. Let's deal with it. You know? So I don't know. I'm trying. I'm doing my best.
But, I mean, it's hard. No, I was just going to say it's hard, because I mean, I'm in this space where at the moment I'm also looking for a school for to have to pre-enroll my daughter for school for next year. And you know, the thoughts and the energy that go into a decision like that for a parent of a Black child or a biracial child or whatever however you describe your children is so different. You know, I've been talking to other parents around, and some are white Irish parents of white Irish children, and you know, their decision making around that is, oh, you know, whatever school is closest, or not all of them in fairness, but you know, some of them, it's, you know, and for me it's like, no, I have to look at ethos, I have to look at, you know, anti-discrimination policies, I have to look at, you know, so the energy, and it's the same as yourself, making sure that there's books around the house that are, you know, that talk about the, you know, that are empowering for her to read, and books that paint people of color as beautiful, and making sure she has Black dolls, and like, you know, it's a conscious effort. It's, you know, you can't you can't, not that anybody does, but you definitely can't cruise through parenting when you have a Black child.
Yeah, it's so true. Like my son started school on Tuesday, and like, oh, I was just like, I love you, and you know you're loved. He was like, yeah, mommy, I know. It was just like, and daddy loves you, and Jesus loves you, and I was just like, because I was like, if they're not nice to him, I'm like, at least he will know that he is loved.
Oh,
and like, I cried so much, and he was just like, bye, mommy. He did not even cry, did not even look back.
Him. He was probably just so excited.
But I was just like having issues.
No, it's hard. I cried on the first day she went to school, because I realized when the kids were lining up that she was the only Black girl. That's why.
No.
It wasn't even, she was so excited about going to school that I wasn't nervous about that, because I was feeding off her excitement as well. But when I realized, I was like, oh, wait a minute, there's nobody else that looks like her. And I was like, no, I wasn't in that position 20 years ago for her to be in that position now. Come on. I kept secretly waiting for like a Black family to pull up. I was like, where are you guys?
You're probably like me. Like if I'm in a shopping mall, I'm just like, you know, waving at every Black person I see. And they, like, most of them just look at me like, okay.
Oh
God. Oh man. But like, yeah, I'm praying and hoping that our children have a better time than we did, or at least, even if they still come across racism, I'm hoping that there are people who will be fighting for it and against it. You know, we have allies now. I'm hoping and praying that teachers are better trained now, you know, and that there are governing bodies, you know, like the Irish Network Against Racism, where we can report these things to. I didn't know I could, you know, because if I did, I would have been reporting something every day in the past. And then also, like, my home, I'm trying to create a safe home where my kid knows, both my kids know that, you know, if something happens, you come and tell mommy, and we're grounded in this love for each other, in a deeper divine love, and you know, that we can talk about any and everything, which is something that didn't happen for me when I was younger. Which I think would have helped. I think if you can talk about it at home, it makes things just that bit easier, you know?
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah. So I guess we're kind of coming to the end of this.
Yes.
But I just think you're amazing.
Oh my goodness, you're amazing.
And I feel like if I knew myself better, I probably would have gone down the road that you went at such a young and early age. Do you know what I mean? But I was too busy chasing. I wanted to be rich. I wanted to be a rich doctor and a rich so, but now I'm back. I know me better, and I look forward to working with like people like you and other people on the Black and Irish page. That page has just, I think they're doing such a wonderful job.
Yeah.
And just
incredible.
other young, by young, we're in our 30s, we're still young, young immigrant or Irish born people who are really kind of raising their voices and saying, look, this is not an American thing. And I love that you keep emphasizing that, because for me it's hard to separate the two, because I've lived in both places and I've seen the struggle of the Black Americans. So it's nice to now, I have a few people lined up like yourself from Ireland who we're going to be able to talk about the Irish context more. So usually I end by asking, what would you say to white people, and then what would you say to Black people? So take it away.
Wow. Okay. So I suppose what I would say to white people is, that there's an onus on you to educate yourself about the best way to make these changes, and the onus really is on you. Knowing, as I mentioned before, considering intent versus impact, and kind of checking yourself a little bit when you are responding to somebody who has experienced racism, and looking at how you respond, and are you minimizing, are you trying to minimize their pain, but in fact are you minimizing the experience altogether? And just think of the impact of that. But also I think overall I do believe that there are more good people, and people are generally good, and a lot of the ignorance that we see is learned, and the brilliant thing about that is that it can be unlearned. So I'm hopeful, and I also am not painting every white person with the same brush. This is not me saying all white people are racist and whatever. I'm just kind of generally speaking. And to Black people, gosh, I want to say you are enough. These are some of the affirmations that my daughter and I say together every night. I want to say that you are enough, you are beautiful, you deserve long, happy, healthy, safe, and fulfilled life, and you are loved. And you can heal from generational trauma. I know it's hard, but you can do it. And you can break some of the patterns. And you will. I think sometimes just bringing your awareness to it is the first step to actually doing that. So, yeah.
Oh, that was so amazing. You're my kind of girl. Sorry, my kids keep coming in. I'm just like, mute. But that was so beautiful. And I love, and this is one thing I've tried to do with this podcast, to say that it's not all white people that are racist, and I love that you were emphasizing that, but it is on you to educate yourself and to actually be anti-racist and to just, do your part, because we are all one, And then to Black people, I think that's the problem for Black people. We don't know that we're enough. We don't know that we're lovable or loving. And we don't know, that we're beautiful. Like, we're too busy, bleaching our skins and, doing our fake hair and, things like that. Not that there's anything wrong with braids, but if your worth and your love for yourself comes from that, then there's something wrong with it. Sorry, lovely people. But yeah, I just love that. And I love that you've come to a point where, as a mixed baby, that you love every aspect of you. You love your Irish, your Creole, your Kenyan. I love how your accent changes from like being Kenyan to really Irish.
It sometimes depends who I'm talking to. And I end up not even realizing I'm doing it. And I catch myself and I'm like, oh no, I did it again.
I know. I know. I feel like it's every Black child's problem that's in a third culture dimension type of
Yes.
thing. We're just
Yeah.
like we switch from here to there. And
Mm-hmm.
over the years, from being in America, my accent has become so American now as well. I'm just like, I don't know who I am. But when I'm talking to my mom, I'm so Kenyan. I'm so
Yeah, me too.
yeah, but anyway, it's the fun. But thank you so much for coming on.
Thank you
I'm
for
just
having
gonna
me.
say just a quick short prayer and then we're
Okay.
done.
Okay.
So God, I just want to thank you so much for Claudia. I thank you for all the healing that she has received over the years and all the healing that Black people are receiving all over the world from generational traumas that we didn't think that we could break for years and years. So God, we thank you and we pray for a better future for our children, a future where love and peace are the driving forces. In Jesus' name, amen.
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 Oh.
You want to say hi to Claudia? Yeah.
Hi.
Say hi, Claudia.
Hi.
And say hi.
Hi.